step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. Here I am to worship. So here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth you created, all full of sin became poor. Here I am. So here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. So here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. One more time, just the voices. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name.
The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me,
let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Bless the Lord. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Lord, I'll worship your holy name. Lord, I'll worship your holy name. I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. All your ways are good. All your ways are sure. I will trust in you alone. Higher than my sight, high above my life. I will trust in you alone. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. Yeah, I will follow you. Yeah. Light into the world, light into my life. I will trust in you alone. You're the one I see. Knowing I will find all I need in you alone, in you alone. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Whom you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. Yeah, I will follow you. you there's joy, unending joy. And I will follow. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow you. Whom you love, I'll love. How you serve, I'll serve. If this life I lose, I will follow you. Yeah, I will follow you. Yeah, I will follow you. Yeah, I will follow you. Yeah.
Today we're going to wrap up our series that we've been looking at this past month around loving and serving our neighbors. We've been talking about discipleship and the Great Commission over these last few weeks. And today I want to talk about thinking like a missionary for us as we wrap up our series. I'm not sure about you, but when I was growing up in the church as a young boy in the congregation I was part of, we would have these special missionary nights where missionaries would come and share their story, and it was one of those moments as a kid, looking out to how the church reacted, there was a bit of a dichotomy in which, the missionary was the one who would go and to another country, another culture with the objection to, or their goal was to plant a church or serve the poor, equip people, teach them the things of Christ. And then there was kind of the rest of us that stayed back. And as a little kid, that was kind of my mindset. You had these kind of superheroes who did stuff that people prayed they never would get called by God to go do. And generally, I've since learned most of them never got paid very well to go do that, but they sacrificed a lot in their life. And I know in our own denomination, we have some similar sacrifices, our own church, of people who have sacrificed, and we get to sit on the shoulders of their sacrifice, and God's been has worked through them over the years. But growing up as a kid, I had this image of like the superstar missionaries and then the rest of us Jesus followers, and we just kind of get to stay home, and they go off and do all the fun stuff and weird stuff at times, and stuff I wasn't sure of I wanted really to do as a kid. But as I walked with Christ, as I read the scriptures, as people came alongside and said, hey, why don't you follow me as I follow Jesus? As people taught me the teachings of Jesus, one of the things that I quickly realized was the reality that we are all called to be part of the Great Commission. It's not just for an elite group of people, superstars, but there's a calling on all of our lives, and we all have a part to play in the link of people coming to faith in their life. The biblical story shares with us that we are ambassadors for Christ. We reflect the light of Christ to the world in which we live and the people that we come across. As we look at not just the biblical story, but church history, one of the things that fascinates me is the reality that the gospel spread not because of guys like Paul, though we needed Apostle Paul, we needed these great superstars. The gospel spread more because of normal, everyday individuals who took the gospel and their changed life with them wherever they went. There's a section in Acts where There was persecution in the church, and it says that the church scattered because of the persecution. It is windy. But this church scattered because of the persecution. And you know what happened? The church grew. Every day, ordinary people took their transformed lives and loved and served and taught the teachings of Christ to those they encountered. The church board I shared a couple of weeks ago is reading this book called Small Town Mission. You might want to look it up, Small Town Mission. And the author in there says these words: to engage our small town with the gospel, everyone needs to think like a missionary. For most of us, we don't think like a missionary. You know, for most of us, we get up in the morning. If we're early birds, we're up, we're ready to go. If we're not early birds, the alarm goes off. We hit it and hope, no one bugs you so you can just stay in bed. You go kind of through your normal routines of life. But the author in this book is reminding us as followers of Christ that we're ambassadors and that we have an opportunity where we live. And he challenges us to think like missionaries. And so that's the challenge I want to share with us this morning is for us as we come into the summer, as we come out of COVID and whatever the results of all of it means, is to call us to remember that Christ has called us to this community for this season. And we need to think like a missionary. In the book that the church board's reading, he says there's two categories we have to keep in front of us if we're going to think like a missionary. And so the first one is we need to contend for the gospel. And he pulls this out of Jude verse 3. So let me read that. Jude verse 3. He says, "Beloved, although I was very eager to write to you about our common salvation, I found it necessary to write appealing to you to contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints." When the author says faith in this passage, he is speaking about the message of Jesus. Often we'll interchange that word faith for the gospel, and so we'll talk about the gospel, and simply the gospel refers to what Jesus taught, to what Jesus stood for. When the author speaks about saints, that's us. I know we might not think of ourselves as saints. Maybe you look to the one beside you and you're like, nope, they are not a saint. But in the eyes of Christ, someone's getting a little shoulder rub there maybe. Hey? So anyways, in the eyes of Christ, we are children of God. And yet, I know that some of us have made mistakes. But the grace of God has called us to walk into something deeper and better. And the scripture has used this term called saints to remind us of the identity change that has taken place in the midst of our life, of who we are. In this passage, he says, contend for the faith, or we would say contend for the gospel. And what he's speaking about here is that he's calling us to strive to articulate the message of the gospel correctly in truth. Some would say not to water it down. To be able to recognize and distinguish between what the real gospel is and what some would call a false or loveless gospel that can also exist. Those who contend for the gospel will grieve when they hear others who are falsely proclaiming the gospel. Who result, the situation where you have people go, well, if that is what Jesus is about, I don't want anything to do with that. Our hearts should hurt when people become confused about who Jesus is. And it is an incredible opportunity to be able to remind them about who Jesus actually is and show them. And so the first part of thinking like a missionary is to contend for the missionary. You might put it in this way. It's really to know the gospel. Do we know the gospel? Would we be able to recognize when it is falsely taught? Would we be able to recognize the truths that it speaks and how it can relate to those around us? The author is calling us to know the message of Christ, to wrap ourselves around his message around us. If it was a pool, it was this idea of diving into the pool and being surrounded by the pool water. This is what we are called to within the gospel message. The second category to think like a missionary, so the first one is contend for the gospel, know the gospel. And then the second one is contextualizing. And this really is about methodology. How many of you have seen more than one way of sharing the gospel in your time and being part of the church? Right? Think about how many different methods have come over. Think about how many, some of you have been in the church a long time. Think about the change that you've seen just in our own church over the years. Change is part of life. The method changes, but you know that Jesus doesn't. Jesus is faithful. He is our anchor. And the methods might change. We may have to be outside and not allowed in our buildings as much as this year has shown. But the message has never changed. The message has gone out. The methods, well, they adapt. The Apostle Paul shares with us in 1 Corinthians these words of how he adapted. He changed his methods, but never the message. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19 to 22. He writes this: "Even though I am a free man with no master, I have become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under that law. Even though I am not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who are under the law. And when I am with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some." What we read here is that Paul, if he went to this group, he would dress like them. He would speak their language. He would eat with them. He'd eat their foods. But if he was over here and they ate different foods, then he ate different foods. It was about serving, loving, and serving his neighbors. Notice it was never at the expense, though, of disobeying Christ. The method changed based on the culture and the people. He looked at the stories of the people and he said, okay, this aspect of Christ is going to connect with who they are. This is what they need to hear from the gospel. Just as if we today went to a different culture, even a different culture in our own country, the method may be different than what we are doing today. Each generation, I believe, needs to understand and articulate the gospel that makes sense for their generation. Some of you have had the blessing of being able to see several generations come along, and I'm sure you can articulate the differences in some of those generations. Each generation needs to wrestle with the context in which they find themselves. Paul was a tent maker. That means that he literally made tents. As he traveled around, sometimes the church would pay him so he didn't have to work. Sometimes the church didn't pay him. He didn't have any money, so he made tents. He sold tents. He was a businessman, also a preacher and a scholar. And Paul's a guy, as you read the text, I imagine there he is in the marketplace. And I'll guarantee, not only did he sell his tents, but he was building relationships, asking God to open up doors that he would be able to speak the gospel into their life, into the businessmen and women that he encountered in the marketplace, and also to his customers that he would engage with in a day-to-day. When he was in prison, we know that he witnessed to the guards because they were there. He witnessed to the prisoners because they were there. That's where he was. He knows what it means to have a lot and what it means to have little. Wherever he went, the gospel went with him. Jesus was there. To be Jesus missionaries in our small town means we have to have an equal zeal, both for contending and contextualizing the gospel in our community, because we are Jesus missionaries. Now, there's two traps that we can fall into. Maybe you already noticed them. The two traps are simple. We're all guilty of them from time to time. The first trap is this, is that we contend for the gospel, but we don't contextualize. Often this is a form of legalism. We make the road so narrow that, some of our churches at times we can get so narrow we wouldn't even let Jesus preach. But at other times, which is the second part, is we move away from being so legalistic to what some might call we're too liberal, in the sense that we contextualize, but we don't contend for the gospel. And we forget about obeying the commands of Christ. They notice in Paul, he said, I'll change as long as it doesn't go against what Christ has called us to be and to do. And so those are two dangers that we can fall in depending on the season of life and what's going on. And we just need to be aware of that it's there, and have healthy conversations and relationships to check ourselves and understand. But here's what I am convinced of, is it's not an easy road. And it's going to take humility and grace for ourselves and towards others as we wrestle through sharing the gospel message. For most of us who are listening, the reality is we've lived in a community for a long time, and I get we don't always think of ourselves as missionaries. But Christ has called us to be ambassadors. And so can I challenge us this summer to just go, hey, you're a missionary. How can you love and serve and share the gospel this week, this month? Some of us are going to be called or are running small businesses or medium businesses or large businesses. Then that's our sphere of influence. Some of us are going to be called to the workplace and different companies, and that's where we get to be a representative of Christ, to be an influence for those around us. Some of us are going to have the blessing of being stay-at-home parents. At times maybe a little frustrating, but there's an opportunity that other people will never get. And so how do you serve Jesus in that moment? Some find themselves in the midst of a season where they have lots of opportunity to volunteer and have more relationships than others. How do you follow Jesus in the midst of that season and honor Christ and serve and invest in others? The author Aaron Morrow writes this: "It seems reasonable to conclude that building relationships with non-Christians and living out our faith in an authentic way is foundational to having a well thought out and contextualized strategy for mission." Wherever we go as a church, even if we are never allowed to meet in large meetings again, I know we will, but even if we're not, Jesus is faithful. Jesus is still our anchor, and we are still called to share the gospel. The methods are going to change over the years. They have over my small life. But the message never changes. The message is that God loved the world. The message is that He invites us to be part of the transformation of lives around us. And the core of that starts with loving and serving our neighbors, knowing the gospel, and communicating that to others around us. There are still great things ahead for us as people and for our church. And so let us wrestle and remind ourselves today that we have a Redeemer that lives, and we are missionaries. Let me close in prayer, and the worship team will come back up and get blown around as we that wind just keeps coming. Man, all right, let me pray. Father, as we sing this song of a reminder, a prayer of who you are, that you are with us, that you are leading us, I pray, Father, that we would not forget our identity in Christ and who you are. Help us as we sing this song to let it be an act of prayer. And Lord, would you speak into the midst of our life today, even if it has nothing related to what I have shared. Speak into the lives of those who are listening for your glory and their fruitfulness. Amen.
I was buried beneath my shame. You could carry that kind of weight. It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. Your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new. Jesus, when I met you, you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my